Hi everyone and welcome to Book Boop. My name is Rachel and today I'm going to be doing my January wrap up. So I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in the month of January. I got through 7 books in January, which I'm so excited about. There's only one book out of my original January TBR I didn't get to, so I'm so pumped about the fact that I got through that many books. I kicked off a great reading year. It's been awesome. I want to try to get through this pretty speedy for you all so you aren't sitting around listening to me blather too much because nobody wants to sit and watch like a super long video. I have my notes here in my trusty bullet journal that I started this year, which I love, by the way. If you don't do a bullet journal, oh my goodness. I've been doing it just to track my reading and my booktube channel, and I absolutely love it. But here I've got my notes just to make sure I keep on track. I remember what I want to say and keep this really concise for you all. So apologize if I refer to my notes. Also, just FYI, my throat's a little scratchy, so if I have to stop and sip my tea a little bit, I apologize about that, but just to keep me from like spontaneously coughing. All right, let's go ahead and jump in. So the first book that I read, I know you probably have heard of because it is legit everywhere on BookTube, and that is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Personally, I love The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. That was my favorite book of 2019, so I was really excited to read this one, and this was a great start to the reading year. This one was incredible, to be honest. I really, really loved it. If you've never heard of The Starless Sea before, just don't know what it's about, the most basic thing I can tell you is about this guy who goes to his university library. He checks out a book that does not have, I don't think it does have as a title, it doesn't have an author, and he starts reading the book, and at one point he starts reading a story that's about him, something that nobody else should know about. He was completely by himself. And once he finds that out, it kind of leads him into a rabbit hole of just intrigue and mystery into this place called the Starless Sea. I know that's super vague. It's hard to give a really concise description about this book, but man, is this book worth it. So first of all, I absolutely adore Erin Morgenstern's writing style. She's so poetic, dreamy, and atmospheric. She has honestly the most atmospheric writing style I have ever read, and I absolutely adore it. It's best to let the words wash over you instead of reading it with too much focus. So the reason I say that is because she's very, very descriptive in her writing style. She has a very dreamy, atmospheric style. But the thing about it is if you try to focus too much while you're reading it, because she's so descriptive with every little thing, if you try to overly focus, I would get frustrated. So after a while, I tried to stop overly focusing on every single description of something and having to go back and reread a sentence going, wait, what was that again? I just let it wash over me. And because of that, it puts me in sort of almost like this dreamlike reading state. It just makes it very atmospheric and it makes it very enjoyable. So if I were to try to pick this apart and really overly pay attention to what she's writing, I probably would get frustrated. But if I just read it and just enjoy the poetic style of it and not worry about trying to understand every single little description, I have a blast reading it. It creates a dreamlike reading environment that really evokes that atmosphere of magic and mystery. So this has lots of just atmospheric, dreamlike. It's like honestly just walking through a weird dream, but it's beautiful, it's strange. A lot of it doesn't make sense, but you still enjoy it anyways. It's a very Alice in Wonderland, but very written more in an adult atmospheric style. It's more fantastical and abstract than the Night Circus. The Night Circus to me is magical realism. At least that's kind of how I see it. It's set in the real world. And this one is as well in a way, but it just has more fantastical and strange concepts than the Night Circus did. So it's a lot more, yeah, it's just a lot more dreamlike, a lot more intricate to me than the Night Circus was. It didn't quite hit a 5-star rating for me because some elements felt too abstract, and also the main love story to me was not believable. There was a love story in this. It wasn't overly focused. It wasn't like the main point of the story by any means, but it was insta-love, at least to me it was, and so I didn't feel like it was very believable. So but it didn't bother me enough to not like the story. I just kind of set the love story aside in my head, like, okay, that really isn't that important to me, just because I just didn't feel like it was very believable. So I didn't really love that part of it, to be honest. Overall, I really, really enjoyed this book, and it has a high rereadability. This is a book that is so intricate that I know there's a lot of stuff I would forget. Like if you ever saw a movie that's just the plot's really intricate, or if it has like a mystery type quality to it, and it's the first time you're seeing it, and you're missing a lot of the cues because you don't know what the end result is, right? So you're missing cues for things. I feel like this is the same way, that if you were to reread it, you would see so many things and read so many things you either didn't remember or like, oh, wow, yeah, why didn't I see that before? So this to me has a very high rereadability, which I think is great. I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars, really close to a 5-star. I really enjoyed it a lot. It's probably going to be one of my favorite books of the year, to be perfectly honest, but it just didn't hit the level of Night Circus for me. I still really enjoyed it, but it just wasn't quite Night Circus, which, I mean, it shouldn't be, but it still had the same writing style and everything. So it was absolutely gorgeous. And also, I want to read this quote for you. There's a quote in the book that I just adored, and it made me think of myself, and it was just perfectly descriptive. It said, when he felt himself falling, he would go and find a new book and fall into it instead and be someone somewhere else for a while. And that to me is what reading is. It's a lot of escapism. Just being able to step away from maybe the stressors of your own life and to just fall into a story. So anyways, that was a long description and a long review of this book because I had a lot of thoughts and feelings about this book, but I really loved it. I recommend it. I agree it's not for everybody. Not everyone loves this type of writing style. Not everybody loves a very dreamlike and honestly sometimes abstract and nonsensical writing and story. This story is hard to follow. It really is. But I enjoyed the writing style so much that I didn't care. So you'll either love this like I did or be like, it's too weird for me. And I get that. So if you didn't really love this one, I get it. I do. But I really enjoyed it. And also, my goodness, this book is beautiful. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So a lot of these books I had borrowed from the library and I don't have them anymore, so I can't hold them up for you. So I can't hold up this next one, but it is Saving Lucas Biggs by Marissa de los Santos and David Teague. It is a middle grade, I would say, magical realism story. If you've never heard of it before, Saving Lucas Biggs is about this young girl, and her father has just been put in jail for, I think like for arson and killing people. At least that's what he's been sentenced to. And not only that, but he's been sentenced to death. He's been sentenced for the death penalty. And this girl, she knows that her father is innocent. And in her family, they have the ability to time travel, but they are sworn in their family to never use that power. And she ends up using that power to go to far in the past to try to set some things in motion so that her father will not be put in jail and sentenced to death for a crime that he didn't commit. That's a little bit of an abstract description, but I don't want to give too much because there's a lot of a mystery element in this. And this is a middle grade I have had on my TBR for the longest time. I was really, really excited to read it. I really enjoyed, there are some alternating timeline chapters and a time travel element. I loved the time travel element. I loved jumping back and forth between alternating timelines. I always love that in books. Some people hate it, some people love it. I really love it. I love it when you read a chapter and you're in the now and then you read the next chapter and it jumps to the past, either for a different character we're following or just in this aspect where she's jumping to the past and she ends up being in the past. But there are even some chapters too where it jumps back and forth between her being in the present and the past. And I really enjoy that. It's a lot of fun. I think the chapters are set in the early 1900s, I think that's right. Maybe in the 1920s, 30s, something like that. I can't fully remember. I enjoyed the emphasis on family history and remembering our past. It was really fun having this character jump back in time and running into some past family members and just the emphasis on how important family is. I love it when I read that in books. It just gives me a nostalgic feeling for my own family. And I most recently got to see some family members I haven't seen in like 10 years. And it was just heartwarming to me to be able to be near family. And this just reminds me of that. And I really love books that evoke that feeling. I think it's great. I loved this concept that was in this book for time travel called History Resists. And basically time itself, like the reason they swore in this family to never time travel is the fact that They didn't want to affect the timeline. On top of that, whenever they did try to affect the timeline, history would resist, which means things would happen in time to try to recorrect itself. Like she would try to stop someone from hurting someone else, and while she's running to try to fix it, maybe she trips and falls, like the rug kind of snags up, or just things happen to try to get her from changing what the past was. And I loved that idea, and also the fact that she's not able to be back in time for very long. She starts to feel it after a while. Her body starts to fatigue. She starts to feel sick. She starts to not feel well because time is like, you're not supposed to be here. And I thought that was a really cool concept. The fact that time was kind of resisting her and resisting the fact that she traveled into the past, resisting to the things she was trying to change. And I thought that was a really cool concept because I actually haven't really seen that in time travel type situations. I will say I felt like the second half of the book dragged a bit, and it felt a bit meandering. The first half of the book and the part of the book that's set in the past, I really enjoyed a lot. But to me, there was a good chunk of the book towards the end that just felt too long, and it felt like it should have wrapped up sooner, and it wasn't as enjoyable to me. Overall, I gave this 3.5 stars out of 5. It was a really enjoyable book. I really recommend it. If you love alternating timelines, if you like family history and looking at the effect of past choices in families to future choices and how it affects, if you like that kind of idea, you probably really love this book. Okay, so the next one, again, I borrowed this one from the library, and this is another one I've had on my TBR forever, and that is The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black. This is a young adult fantasy book. You probably know Holly Black for all of her Cruel Prince series. I can't remember, it's Fae of the something. I don't remember the name. I can never remember the name of that series, but it's the Cruel Prince series. Apparently The Darkest Part of the Forest, which she wrote I did not write that down, but she wrote several years ago. And it's supposed to be connected to the Cruel Prince series in some way. And I don't normally read Fae. How do I explain this one? Okay, so we've got this small town that has always had a magical element to it. There is a forest in this town that is supposed to house fae, supposed to house fairies. And on top of that, there is this glass coffin in the middle of the forest that holds a fae prince. And he has been asleep for a long time. I think maybe 100 years or something like that within this story. And there's just people will come and travel to this town to see this fae prince and to kind of find fairies and that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of superstition with it. So it's a big mix of real world and fae. So I think it takes place in the States, I'm pretty sure, in the United States, but it's kind of has obviously this Irish feel. It's a really interesting concept, I will say. I had a difficult time figuring out how I felt about this one. I have so many mixed feelings about this book. I really liked the story. I thought the story was interesting. I didn't like the characters. It was a little bit, granted it's young adult, it was a little too angsty for me, to be perfectly honest. The character's a little bit too angsty. The main character we follow majority of the time is a teenage girl, and she's a little bit too into herself and her feelings and what guys she likes. And I don't know, it just felt too angsty for me, and it felt a little bit too childish or teenagerish to me, which again, it's a young adult. I get it's not written for my age group, but I just didn't like the characters that much. I didn't like their decisions. I didn't like their personalities, honestly, but the story was really interesting. I found the story interesting. Again, not a fan of the angst. I'm not the target audience, so I get that. I was interested and fascinated with the mix of suburban town and old style fairies. That's an interesting concept, to have just this basic, normal suburban town. I live in a suburban town, and just the idea of living my normal life, but just some weird fae stuff happens sometimes. Every once in a while, somebody disappears. Somebody shows up drowned in the lake because a hag dragged him in or something. I don't know, people would carry around certain things in their pockets to help keep fae out, and they would wear their socks inside out. It was supposed Fae didn't like that. I don't know. It was just like weird little superstitions this town had, and it was normal to like have those superstitions and to do these certain things to keep the Fae at bay. And it was just a really interesting concept. I will say that. It was entertaining, but to me, it wasn't really that memorable. It didn't quite pique my interest in more Fae stories by Holly Black. I figured this one could either pique my interest and make me want to read the Cruel Prince series, or just kind of be like, eh. And for me, it was kind of eh. I wasn't a huge fan. I gave it 2.5 stars. It's pretty low for me. I normally don't give very many books anything lower than a 3-star, but I just didn't enjoy it. I made myself push through because the story was interesting. I was interested to see where the story was going, but I didn't feel connected to the characters, and half the time I was not rooting for them, to be perfectly honest, so wasn't a huge fan. After that, I moved on to an ebook that I borrowed from my library called The League of Beastly Dreadfuls by Holly Grant. This is a middle grade paranormal kind of mystery, I would say. We follow this girl who at the beginning of the book, her parents have this horrible accident to where they die, and then she's picked up from school. She finds this out when she's picked up from school by these 2 old women who claim they are her aunts. She's never really met her aunts before. She knows that her dad, I think, has sisters, or great aunts, and she's never really met them or hasn't met them in a long time. And so these aunts kind of whisk her away and take her to their home that's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And this home used to be a psychiatric hospital or an insane asylum, basically. And so it's just this really creepy place it's creaky and creepy and ghosty, and there's just some mystery aspect to it about what's going on with these aunts, why are they living there, what really happened to her parents, like just all the stuff. So it's got sort of like this mystery aspect to it. The book this is another one I've had on my TBR forever. I think it's the one I've had on my TBR the longest, at least from the beginning of the year. And this book was pretty juvenile. I really enjoy reading middle grade. I love reading middle grade so much. And most of the time, middle grade is still written in a way that I connect to it really well, and I love it. And I love the fast-pacedness of the stories because it's meant to grab children's attention and keep their attention. But this one the writing style felt very juvenile for me. It was very just sort of goofy and hokey, but not in a fun way. It felt like a book that someone who had just transitioned from children's to middle grade. It felt like it was just on the brink of being more of a children's book to me instead of middle grade. So it felt very juvenile and aimed for very young readers. I liked the dark concept of the story, but the campiness of the writing just didn't work for me. And again, I know I'm not the target audience, but again, this middle grade story felt more like just sort of juvenile and younger than normally I would read within a middle grade book. I honestly considered not finishing it, but since it was such a quick read, I pushed through because I just wanted to see if it got better and how it finished and all of that. It wasn't a bad book, but I'm so far removed from the target audience that I felt like I couldn't rate it fairly. So I actually decided not to rate this book because it felt so far from my target audience. It felt so far and juvenile to me that I didn't consider it fair for me to rate it because I just felt like I was too far removed from who it's written for, because it just felt like it was written for someone much, much younger, even further younger than middle grade to me. So it's enjoyable. I recommend it for young readers, definitely. This is a book I would love to see my daughter read one day, because I think it's fun. It was cute. It was a little creepy. It was a great atmospheric read, but it was just so young feeling that I didn't feel like it was right for me to rate it. So I didn't rate that one. Okay, now we jump from middle grade. This is a little jarring. We jump from middle grade all the way to an adult mystery thriller called The Missing Years by Lexi Elliott. This book I read from the library as well. This was one of my first experiences with an adult mystery and thriller. If you've never heard about The Missing Years before, it's about this young lady. I would say she's probably in her early 30s. Her mother has just passed away, and after her mother passes away, her mom has left her childhood home in the Scottish Highlands. But the thing is that she owns half of the home. The other half is left to her father, who went missing, I think about 15 to 20 years ago. And so she ends up going, after her mother's death, she ends up going to this house, trying to see if she can kind of get the affairs in order, seeing if there's any way she can try to get to have the entire house bequeathed to her, since her father's been missing for so long, not knowing what happened to him, so where she can maybe sell the home or something, just kind of get it out. And she ends up going there, and some mysterious things start happening at the house, and some certain things about her past start to come up and unravel. So it sounded like a really interesting and creepy concept. I mean, who doesn't want to read a book that's about this creepy old house in the Scottish Highlands, in like this small town? It's got this like small town vibe, really creepy old home. Is it haunted? I don't know. I mean, it just sounds like really, really fun and really creepy. And so it's kind of like a good kind of first delve into adult mystery thriller for me, because I really want to get into the genre. The one plus about this book, it was atmospheric. I will give it that. It definitely gave that vibe of being in the Scottish Highlands, a lot of descriptors for it. I've never been to Scotland. I'd love to go to Scotland, but just sort of like this foggy feel, greenery, very country. It sounded beautiful. And so the atmosphere I thought was well done. I personally was not a fan of the main character. Her paranoia felt a bit much at times. We were pretty much in her head a lot, and she was very paranoid. I mean, every little thing that happened, she was super paranoid about. And it started to get a little bit annoying, to be perfectly honest. The mystery and thriller reveal. So this is a mystery and a thriller. So there's going to be some little reveals within the book, little pops of aha moments. They fell a bit flat for me, and they kind of lacked punch. A lot of the sort of parts that were supposed to be thrilling, or like, ooh, look at this big reveal, just didn't really hit me. I just didn't really like them that much. There was one that was supposedly supposed to be a big reveal, and I already saw it coming. Like, I knew it was going to happen, and then when they put it out there like it was a huge reveal, it was like, I already knew that. Like, that was obvious. So I just didn't feel like it just didn't hit the punches of really wowing me, basically, from what I would expect from a thriller. It felt a lot more of a relational drama than a thriller. It just felt more about family relationships and the kind of the angst that comes with that. Just family drama. That's what it felt more like. So I guess if you like more like domestic thrillers, this might be more your jam. I'm just not really that interested in domestic thrillers. It just was more focused on sort of that aspect, with not necessarily being within more of the mystery thriller aspect, if that makes sense. It wasn't what I was hoping for, and I hope to find a good mystery and thriller in the near future. So I do want to get more into the genre. This one just wasn't really for me, so I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. I was sad to give it that low, but I just didn't really enjoy it that much. I didn't really end up liking it, but I'm looking forward to reading some more. I will say one more thing, though. One thing I did really love about this book was how often tea time came up. I love tea. I drink several cups of it a day, and I love the fact that overseas, tea is a huge thing, and about that there's tea time. And I felt like every little thing that happened in this book, they were like, so they put the kettle on, and oh, let's get some tea, and anything that was like stressful that would happen. Okay, let's make a pot of tea. Or, oh, we've had a long day, let's make a pot of tea. There was just like lots of, it's tea time, let's make tea, which I kind of liked that concept. I would love to be able to live like that. I mean, I drink a lot of tea, but I just love that for that to be like a normal thing at home, to be like, let's put the kettle on. So I thought that did make me happy, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, so we're down to, I think, two more books. Let's get this done. So The Common Rule was the next one I read, by Justin Whitmore Early. This is a book that I read for work. It is a nonfiction. It's like a self-help-ish type book. What it's about is that it's a faith-based book about the idea of incorporating habits that draw you closer to God, being closer to your family and neighbors, and caring more about people than about yourself. It helps you look more outward and towards God than inward. So it has the idea of having 4 different daily habits and 4 different weekly habits to incorporate in your routine. If you're curious, I can tell you the habits, but I will say this was a very easy to read self-help book. for incorporating habits that align with belief. I love the fact that this book did not make me feel awful about myself. Sometimes when I read like self-help type books, they can make me feel really bad about myself. Like I'm just doing life all wrong. And I didn't feel that way so much in this one. It was helpful, but it didn't make me feel bad. And it wasn't so just like in depth to where I didn't feel like I couldn't connect with it. So I really enjoyed that a lot. So just for your information, the 4 daily habits were praying 3 times a day, 1 meal with others. So having a family meal every day or trying to have a meal with another person every day, 1 hour with your phone off or just having your phone away from you, and reading scripture before phone. So like as soon as you get up in the morning, not reaching for your phone, but reading God's word first. And then 4 weekly habits were 1 hour of conversation with a friend a week. So like meeting somebody for coffee or on the phone or whatever. Curating your media, being picky about what you decide to ingest media-wise, whether it's what you watch on your phone or what TV shows or movies you watch. Just trying to curate things instead of just sitting and binging, and just trying to be very picky about what you watch and how much you watch. Fast for something for 24 hours. The main one was food, like not eating for 24 hours, or fasting from something, whether it's, I don't know, like fasting from your phone for 24 hours or I don't know, something like that. And then also the habit of having Sabbath, having 1 day a week where you rest, which I love that idea too, because that one's actually really hard to do. I love also how it gave variations on the habits based on lifestyle. At the end of the book, it was like, okay, so we've covered all these habits. Here's some way to look at them if you are a mom, or if you suffer from anxiety, or if you work long hours, or it just sort of, it had different variations for people's different lifestyles of maybe look at this habit this way, try it this way to help fit your lifestyle, or maybe some things you're struggling with. So all in all, it was a great book. I give it 4 stars out of 5. I really enjoyed it a lot, and I own it, but I handed it over to a friend of mine who's going to be reading it as well. So it was good. I recommend it. So if you're looking for like a faith-based kind of look at habits and how to kind of like curate your habits a little bit more, so I recommend it. So it was really good. All right, let's jump to the last one. And this one I actually do have. Let's finish this up because this has almost been 30 minutes, which is ridiculous. Okay, next one. Conference of the Birds by Ransom Riggs. This is the 5th book in the Miss Peregrine series. If you've never heard of this series before, it's about these kids that have these unique, odd abilities, peculiar abilities. Whether some of them can conjure fire with their hands, or can communicate and control bees, or they're lighter than air and they have to wear heavy shoes, or else they'll just float away. Just weird peculiarities. And that's kind of all I'm going to say about it. There's way more about it than that, but this is the 5th book in the series, and it was a good time, I gotta tell you. So I made the mistake of not refreshing myself on the plot. I thought I remembered everything that happened in the last book. I did not. So I should have refreshed my memory, to be perfectly honest. I will make sure I do that from now on and like read some kind of summary or something so I can remember what happened, and I will enjoy it a lot more, because I ended up spending the first half of the book getting my footing and remembering what on earth was going on. Because I thought I remembered and I didn't. I was like, what is happening? So it took me a while to get into it because I couldn't remember. And there was some recapping, but not very much. So that was a struggle for me, and that was my fault. That was completely my fault. I should have either reread the last one, or I should have read a recap or something. So I'm going to make sure I get in the habit of doing that before I read another book in a series when it's been a while. I really enjoyed hanging out with all the familiar characters again. I loved the concept of loops and what places were traveled to. So in this series, there's this thing called loops where people would hide in places where a day would repeat itself. Think like Groundhog Day. The day would repeat itself over and over and over. And it keeps them from like aging. It protects them because usually they keep these places hidden so most normal people can't find them. So there's all these different loops all over the world that would be looping all sorts of different days in history, whether from really, really, really long time ago to just a few days ago. So it's just really interesting to it's kind of like time jumping, like time travel, which is really fun. It's really fun to kind of travel to all these different places and travel to these different time periods. So I like the loop concept. I think it's fun. There's a portion of the book that has like a checklist quest theme, which I really enjoy. I always love that, like so when they have to set out on a quest and there's these certain things they have to acquire on their quest. I like things like that. I like this. I love checklists, so I like checklist quests. It was really fun. I did really enjoy that a lot. And then last thing I read was just looking forward to seeing how this ends. So the next book, I believe, is the last one, because this is like another trilogy set. So the 6th book, I think, will be the last book. But the books 4, 5, and then 6 are all set in America, which has been really cool because the first 3 were set in England and everything. So this has been really, really interesting and really fun. I really enjoy this series a lot. One of my favorite things about it is the fact that there's a lot of old pictures that are used to be incorporated in the story, which is really fun. I like it when books have illustrations or they have pictures to go along the story. It just enhances it. It enhances like the creepiness of it. There's a creepiness factor to these stories, and to me the pictures themselves are the creepiest thing. So I ended up giving this 4 stars out of 5. I really enjoyed it a lot, and I was excited to read this like ASAP because it just came out in January. So it's really, really fun to jump into a book right after it came out and just get to jump on the bandwagon. So it was good times. Okay. Woo, I gotta catch my breath. That was a lot of stuff. So those are all the books that I read in January. I'm sorry I blathered on too long. I was trying to be snappy. If there are any books that I have read or talked about in this video that you have read, please let me know what you think about them down below, especially the Starless Sea. I'm interested to hear some more opinions about that. But if there's any of these that I've read and you read as well, please let me know what you thought about them. Also, let me know what you read in January. I would love to hear what you ended up reading, whether it was 1 book or 12, or I don't know. Some people are really crazy readers and get through a lot of books. But anyways, just let me know what you read. I would love to hear, and I hope you had a fantastic start to your year. On this side of the video over here is my logo. If you click on that, you can subscribe to my channel and follow me on my book journey. On this side of the video over here is a suggestion for another video if you want to watch one right now. But thank you so much for watching. You rock, and don't forget to keep reading. Bye!